Okay, welcome back. I don't know how long it's been since you've been listening to this video. Maybe you just watched the last one. Maybe it's been a few days, but here we go. Let's do some more stuff in After Effects. All right, so in the end of the last video, I just exported Wander Wonder. So I am gonna go ahead and close out these compositions and we're going to start a new composition. So go to new composition. I'm going to leave my 1920 by 1080 and this, let's see, what did I call this? Oh, a forest or a ghost, I guess. Yes, so I'm going to go ahead and just type in Ghost 2 to replicate the composition that I already created. I'm going to do 2397 frames per second here, 23.97, 1920 by 1080, and 10 seconds in terms of duration is going to work out just fine. I'm going to hit OK. And so the first composition I did is we went ahead and created a track map, but we did a few extra things here and added a little bit more effects to essentially have the text disappear as it moved up over the screen. So let's go ahead and jump in and do that. All right, so the two pieces of footage I used for this particular composition is the forest composition here, which is too small, so I'm gonna just scale that up real quick. And the other piece of footage is, let's see, it's this piece of smoke footage right here. And I think this one is too big, so we're gonna shrink it down. Now, ideally, like this forest footage was a little bit too small. Me bringing up the scale, let's see, I brought it up to 152%. So it could be, let me just shut off the visibility of the smoke layer. It could be a little bit pixelated. It's not ideal to really blow up footage very much. You run the risk of it looking not great. But this is just the footage I have, and this is a tutorial, so all good. But just something to be aware of. You know, typically you want your footage to, at the very least, be exactly the same size as the composition you're wanting to create. So ideally this footage should be 1920 by 1080 at the very least. But anyway, the smoke footage I shrunk down, so we're all good there. One other thing I wanted to go over with you is that, so I talked a little bit about After Effects being the application that will crash your computer. After Effects will crash on you if your system is struggling a little bit, it's a little older, you don't have a lot of space on your hard drive, you know, whatever it is. And so there is something that you can do while you're running the software that can help. So here is we talked about the size of the canvas right here and like what you can, how you know, big the canvas is when you're looking at it. You can zoom in, you can zoom out. I had talked about having a little bit of space around. That's what I like to do if I have things flying in and out of the frame. The other thing you can do here, this little button right here is very, very helpful. And what it does is it lets you work at a reduced resolution so that your computer isn't processing so many pixels. So it doesn't reduce the quality of your project, but it reduces the quality of what you're able to see the software rendering back to you as you work on it. And, you know, for a lot of stuff that you're doing in After Effects, it's sort of like if you're familiar with 3D software and you can see the person working in the software, they work in like wireframe mode where they don't have all the textured materials on all of the 3D objects. They're working in a mode that allows their computer to work a little faster, make it not work so hard, okay? So you can go down to a half. You can see the quality's a little bit down there, all the way down to a quarter. I work in quarter resolution quality on this canvas window all the time. So you can see it doesn't look great, but remember, this isn't what your project really looks like. It's just that when it's playing, like if you do a playback or something, it's got to render that back to you. And what it's doing is rendering it back to me in a lower resolution so that it can work faster and help me more. So I'm going to put it back into full just for the sake of this tutorial. I always work in full for tutorials because it's annoying to look at a blurry screen, but you can bring that down to a quarter or a third or whatever, and that will help you along with your processing. Okay, so for this one, we already know what we're going to do a little bit, right? We need to make a text layer. I chose the word ghost because I feel like putting this mysterious smoke in a forest would make me think of a ghost. And I really like the word ghost, so that's what I'm going to use. Okay, so here's my word ghost. Now remember, you can change. I'm using this nice bold and thick text just because it works nicely for what's going on, but you can use other types of text. If you're compositing text, you want to use something more thick that's easier for your viewer to see. A scripted font would probably be a terrible idea for this particular type of composite. All right, so I'm going to go back over here, grab my arrow tool. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. We also always want to be careful of the safe area on our screens. We don't want any of our major assets or movement to go off too far from either any edge of the frame. And you can actually, let's see, you can turn that on. Title action safe right here. You can turn that on and it will give you there are varying degrees of safe area for different types of screens that somebody might be viewing your content on. But this outer one is the major one that you don't want to violate. So anyways, you can turn that on and off. I am going to turn it off for the purposes of this tutorial, but you are welcome to use it and encouraged to use it. A lot of students, the big piece of feedback that I'm constantly giving in projects is that they have text and assets too close to the edge of the frame. So it's just something to watch out for. Oh, and actually I want to move this text down a little bit because I'm going to be adding an animation to it here in just a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take my smoke layer, bring that to the top. Now, if you look for stock footage a lot or visual effects footage, if that's something that you've done in your life for whatever reason, you might see a lot of this type of footage that has a black background. And there's actually a very simple and easy magic trick to use to make all of that dark black background transparent. And this is used a lot in this type of visual effects and compositing. So what we're going to do is we're just going to change the blending mode of this particular layer. So with your layer selected, if you go up to layer and you go to blending mode right here, and you go down to screen, you're gonna see that the black background magically disappears because of the type of blending mode that it is. And all that is left behind is the mysterious smoke. So what's neat about this is that when we use the text layer as the track mat, it's only going to show this transparent smoke, and that's going to give a different type of composite or a different type of effect for this particular composition. So let's go ahead and set the track mat, and then I think I need to position this a little higher because I'm outside of the safe area here. But we're going to click on smoke. Remember, the text layer or the layer that's going to act as the cookie cutter needs to be underneath. Going to go to track mat and we're going to choose ghost, and voila. So this is neat because we just have, there's transparency where the black background was on this word ghost. All right, so I'm going to come up and grab my arrow tool here, and I'm going to Command Z that. I need to reposition ghost. So I'm going to position it right here, and then we can see the smoke layers doing what it's supposed to be doing. So I now want to move ghost up on the screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to toggle down on my ghost layer here, and I'm going to toggle down transform, and I'm going to work with some keyframes down here. So we are going to add an animation for it to start where it is positioned now and move up onto to the top of the screen over time. So every single one of these transform properties here has a little time clock next to it. And a time clock basically activates animation or keyframes. So what I'm going to do is I don't want the ghost to start rising right on the very first frame of this composition. When I'm making composites in After Effects, I always give myself a little bit of wiggle room in the beginning and the end of a particular composition. So let's say I want an animation to be like 8 seconds. I usually give myself a second or two in the front and the end so that I can have more options for editing it in Premiere after all the compositing is done. So anyways, I'm just going to pull my scrubbing tool up to 1 second here. On the position property, I'm going to toggle on that time clock, and you're going to see this little diamond pop up. This is called a keyframe. This is the beginning of how an animation works. And an animation at its very baseline, at the very basic level, is 2 keyframes. You need a point A and a point B, and you tell the asset what to do between point A and point B by applying, changes to properties or applying effects. So I'm going to bring this down to the 9-second mark. Let's say I want this to happen over 8 seconds. And then I'm gonna come and move the ghost layer up. You see that rubber band sort of red line following? That is the animation path. There's lots of ways to manipulate these and change these. The other thing that's interesting to know is that I want this to go straight up. I don't want to be messing around and having it go over to the right and left a little bit. Well, if I hold the shift key down while I move this up, it will give me an exact vertical motion going upward without slanting to the right or the left. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So now I have a point A and a point B. Now I can see my word move up over time. The smoke is composited over it, which looks super cool. The other thing that I want to do is I kind of want to make this disappear. So we have animation applied through properties, and then we're going to add an effect also. So I'm actually going to toggle that back down. So I'm going to have this start to disappear maybe around frame 8 into... the 7th second into the 9th second. So the effect that we're going to use is something called scatterize. There are a lot of effects in After Effects. If you're not seeing this effects and presets window up here, you can go to window and effects and presets and get that up onto your screen. Let me see. I want to make this a little bit smaller. So there's a lot in here. I mean, there's just so many, over all the years, there's just so many things that have been put into After Effects, and they keep all the legacy stuff and they just keep adding stuff. So I highly encourage you to go in here and play around if you've never done that. But we're going to look for an effect called CC Scatterize. So that is what we're going to use. So you can, with your layer selected, you can just double click on Scatterize, or you can, sometimes I take this and I just drag it down onto the layer. That's just an old habit of mine. But what you're going to see is on this ghost layer, we have our transform properties, but effects has been added. And you can see CC Scatterize right here. And there are all of the controls. You also have effect controls up here that's a little bit easier to use than the panel down here. So it's really kind of pretty much the same thing. It's just, do you want to change things up here or do you want to do it down here? So there's lots of different ways that people work in After Effects. Like, you can pretty much arrange this workspace however you see fit. So I don't know. It's, you know, however you want to do it. I'm going to go ahead and animate from this window right here. So I'm at the 7th second on my timeline. I'm going to toggle on scatterize. It's at 0 right now, so it's not doing anything. And then I'm going to say by the 9th second, I want a lot of scatter to happen. So I'm going to take this and just drag it. And I'm just going to drag it to like 150. Okay, so then what we're going to see is over these 2 seconds, that scatterize effect, the ghost word is going to move up. And as it keeps moving up, it sort of dissipates into the elements of the forest. All right, so I am going to go back to the beginning and I'm going to play this back to myself. And remember, if you're at that reduced resolution, it's going to be easier on your computer to do this type of thing. Okay, that's all looking good. Very cool. We've got compositing with text and a little bit extra, adding some motion to it and some effects. So I'm going to first save my project, and then I'm going to go to composition and add to render queue, and we're going to go ahead and render this out. I've got my regular settings here, all good to go, default from what I used before. This is going to be Ghost 2. That's fine. Going to the right folder. Beautiful. Let's go ahead and render that out. Okay, awesome. So now what we are going to do is do the last one where I have the word help. I don't really know why I chose that word, but I guess because I knew I wanted to use this one particular effect. And I don't know, it just made sense for some reason. But anyways, let me close up all of these. And I'm going to come back over to my project tab here and let me go ahead and open up help. Okay, so for this one, we're going to get a little bit more experimental with the blending modes. We're going to go ahead and create the text and the track mat and then apply some effects. So, oh, and we're going to add in a solid layer as well. We haven't added a solid layer yet. So I want to make sure you all know how to do that. So I am going to close that out. Let's see. I want to create a new composition. So this is what you'll be doing. Create a new composition. I'm going to call this help 2. Hit OK. And then, so I have these 2 ink pieces of footage. They're pretty cool. See a lot of this kind of stuff in stock video sites. I do believe they're both pretty big. So let me just scale them down. There we go. Okay, so those are both sized over. So yeah, they're just these kind of beautiful like ink, like kind of going through liquid. This other one's the same, but just a little, different colors, things like that. So what I want you to do is I want you to play around with, just play around with different effects, but also the blending mode. So we did something very technical with the blending mode, removing the black background before, but now I want you to change the blending mode for fun. And so there's all these different kinds of blending modes that you can play around with to sort of change how the footage looks. I think for this one, I actually did use screen because I wanted to remove the black ink to create some transparency on this one. And then it allowed for the layer below. So if you have ink 2 on the bottom and ink 1 on top, if we go to layer and blending mode and do screen on this one, it allows the ink from the bottom layer, you can kind of see it. It allows this ink here to bleed through where there was black on this particular layer. So I think that's where we'll leave it. But this is how you can kind of bring two layers together like so. Now I'm going to go ahead and create that text layer. So we'll say help, maybe do an exclamation point on this one. And then I'm going to size that up a little bit more. Okay, and then the next thing we need to do is create a solid layer to have in the bottom. So I am going to go to layer and new, and you can see there's like a lot of different options here. We're going to go over some more of these in the term, but we're going to just do a solid one here. So there's a lot of options, a lot of things to do, but go ahead and choose solid, and I'm going to just choose the pink that I chose before from the composition that I showed you that I already created. But you can see here you have all your choices. If you have a hex code for a particular brand package or something, you can pop that into here. And you can also use your libraries panel. Some of you know what I mean when I say that, and some of you don't, and that's fine. But anyways, I'm going to go ahead and go with the pink that I had before. So I'm going to create that, and that creates a solid color layer. Very useful. They are used all the time. Okay. So now what I need to do is, I know that ink 1 has some transparency. So I can see here if I toggle the site, being able to see ink 2, there's some transparency down to that bottom pink solid layer that I just created. So I need to create a track matte for ink 2. I need to create transparency there because I already have some transparency on this one. I want help to be the track matte for ink 2, basically. So I need to bring help down here and put it underneath ink 2. And then I need to tell ink 2 that I want the track matte to be help. And then what I have is this kind of cool thing going on where the transparency is working in different ways because of that track matte that's applied to ink 2, right? There's like a lot of cool stuff going on with color. And then the other thing that you can do is definitely play around with, if you haven't already, well, you probably haven't in After Effects if you've never used it before, but so we kind of played around with some of the color stuff in Premiere. But in here, you can, there's this one called Colorama that's kind of funny. So I'm going to put Colorama on ink 2. And whoa, you can see that it really just by default just changes it into a crazy color palette, neon, psychedelic looking. And you can actually time a shift here. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that for fun on this one. So I'm going to bring my scrubbing tool to the beginning. The phase shift is what changes the color in all kinds of crazy ways. Let's see. Oh, I see what I'm doing. Okay, so I accidentally, you don't want to, this amount of times, I just told it to spin around 352 times in like a very short amount of time, which doesn't help anything. So anyways, when you start this out, oh, there it is. That's what phases through all the different saturations, is the second panel change. So the first one is usually the amount of times it rotates in a cycle, and then this is like a total 360 of one rotation. You can see that this little line's moving around the circle. So I'm just gonna leave that kind of wherever. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna toggle on my time clock for phase shift. You can also see that keyframe get toggled on. If I go down to ink 2 under effects, you're gonna see Colorama has popped up here, and there is a keyframe applied. If I go down to, where is phase shift? Just a moment. Oh, it's under input phase. So if I toggle down input phase, you can kind of find where it is by how it's the mirrored structure up in the effect controls panel and down here. Anyways, we've got this keyframe set down. So I'm going to go all the way to the end, and I'm going to say that I just want this to cycle through one full 360. So I'm going to hit 1 and then hit enter. And then as I drag this through, you're going to see the color and saturation change through one phase shift. I don't know exactly what a phase shift is. It's just phasing through the color wheel. So anyways, that's pretty neat, right? So now we've got this totally crazy, psychedelic, weird thing going on. And then I wanted to show you one of my favorite effects. So one of my favorite effects is called Bad TV. And what I want to do is, so I have all these layers here. And I want to have an effect that it is applied to basically all the layers. There's a couple of different ways to do it, but we're going to do it through what's called an adjustment layer. So we're going to come up to the layers panel again, and instead of a new solid, we're going to come down to an adjustment layer. And it's going to pop a new layer here. And usually you'll name your adjustment layer like the main effect that you're applying to it. So if you're adding dust and grain to your project, then you would maybe title it dust and grain. But this is basically, you can think of an adjustment layer as like a clear piece of glass that you're putting over the top layer of your composite, and then you're adding more digital effects to that. And it's going to seemingly affect the entire composition, which is the desired outcome. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go to Bad TV. I'm going to pick Bad TV Old, I guess. You can see I'm clicking down and dragging it down to the layer. I don't need to do that. It's just an old habit of mine. Okay, look at this. So it creates this kind of distorted, old sort of TV looking aesthetic, which is, popular. It's glitchy looking, and I think it fits really well with the message of help maybe showing up on an old TV, a little scary. Okay, so now I've got my help ready to go. It's very mysterious, very psychedelic, cool vibes. Let's go ahead and export this. So I am going to export this, but I actually need to export this in a special type of way. So if you look at the sides here, you can see there's actually transparency, and you might not be seeing it this way. There's like little gray and white boxes in the background, and that is the universal symbol for transparency on footage. You might be seeing it like with black on the edges like this. It's still transparency, but it's just looking at it a little differently. This control is right down here. This is toggle transparency grid. I typically like to work with it on because I recognize the transparency easier with it toggled on and understand where I might have holes in my footage. Keeping this transparency is going to be something that I want to keep and be able to bring it into Adobe Premiere with transparency. So we're going to add this to the render queue, but we're going to render this a little bit differently. And this works a little bit different in terms of PC versus Apple. And I have not worked on a PC in After Effects for a very long time, so I'm not sure where we're at with it, but hopefully you can kind of work through and find controls. I don't know. I'll try to find a video to post to go through exporting transparency on a PC, but it should be fairly similar. I mean, it's usually fairly similar. It's just like a button or two is off or different. Okay, so first things first, I'm going to save my project. And then I'm going to go to Composition, Add to Render Queue, and in my render settings, here is where the change is going to happen. So the first thing with my settings is this H.264 setting is not going to work, and it will not export transparency. So what I need to do is on my Apple, I need to change this to a QuickTime video. I'm not sure what the option is for PC. I will find that out for you and obviously share that with you. And I need to include what's called an alpha channel with this footage to keep this transparency and bring it into Premiere. So I am going to choose RBG plus alpha. So those are the two settings, QuickTime and RGB plus alpha. That's what I need to pick to carry transparency out of this particular composition. So I'm going to hit OK. And this is going to take longer to render because it's a higher resolution video, plus it's adding an alpha channel when you render it out. So I also need to make sure that it is going to the correct folder, which it is. I'm going to go ahead and be happy with that, hit save, and then I'm going to render this out. Okay. And so I'm not going to go through and open that up right at the moment. But that's it. Those are our 3 compositions that we're doing in After Effects. So we've got the Ghost, the Help, and then the Wander Wonder composites. And I'm going to go ahead and end this video here. In the next video, we will import those into Premiere and take a look at what those composites look like and talk about sound and build out our little composite project from there. Okay, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.